The tranquil sound of the countryside, rolling fields and rich wildlife, farmers tending to their precious land. But lying behind all of this is a sobering reality. A mental health crisis is gripping the farming community.
It just takes that one thing too many, which then puts you in a state where you just feel like you can't carry on, because how do you find your way out of this?
My name's Joe, and I'm a student journalist investigating the mental health crisis facing farmers and rural workers in my home county of Norfolk, a key part of the UK's rural economy. I'm on my way to go and meet Edward Jones, who's been farming for more than 30 years in the picturesque Norfolk countryside, to try and understand some of the challenges facing farmers. Oh, hi there, lovely to meet you.
Hi Joe, how are you?
Very good, thank you. Edward runs an arable farm which spans 1,500 hectares and grows everything from sugar beet to barley. In his office, he started off by telling me more about the history of the farm.
I'm the third generation, so historically the first generation makes it, the second one builds it, and the third one blows it. Hopefully. I'm not in the process of doing that. Hopefully, yes. We're still in the growth period.
I mean, for you, what are the main financial pressures in farming?
Farming is a bit of a gamble. It's an 18-month gamble. The hardest thing really is the gamble of the weather, and farmers have always been price takers, not price makers. So we can't be fussy. We can't go in and say, we'll have a 10% margin this year, because we have to. We have to take the price what's on offer, because we're the primary producer.
So how big is the impact that weather has on you?
Financially, it is a problem. And we also, I employ people that I personally take responsibility for. And I've got to make sure that I can still afford to pay them.
And that must take a toll on you.
It does take a toll. It does take a toll. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, you know, when I can see crops that have been nurtured for 6 months and come through the winter, and we get to May and it stops raining, you can see the potential, the quality, the yield just vanishing in front of you. Right, so we're going to go to the grain stores and have a look there.
On the journey, Edward told me more about a typical day on the farm.
So up at 6.
Up at 6, right.
Meet the men at 6:30 in the sheds, go through a debrief of what they did yesterday, check on health and safety, and then we go through what we want to achieve during the day, and then off they go.
Spending long hours alone is a problem Edward and his workers face on a daily basis.
They would go off in a tractor at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they'd come back potentially at 7 o'clock at night, and they'd have only seen me and listened to a radio.
Did you say 100,000?
100,000 quid's worth, just what you're looking at.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, Joe, this is feed wheat going into the animal feed mill to be ground into some decent food.
In the grain store, Edward talked more about the pressures he faced.
Drought, pressure, and what's happening in Eastern Europe.
After months of preparations, the Russian President Vladimir Putin has launched a major military operation against Ukraine.
You know, suddenly you got two breadbaskets of the world, Russia and Ukraine, fighting one another. Wheat went from £200 a tonne to 350. It's a well-known fact that Russia produces an awful lot of diesel, which is what we have to use in our tractors at the moment. We don't have any alternative. So the volatility of that price is going up and down like a yo-yo as and when they can get fuel out.
The UK has voted to leave the European Union.
I mean, Brexit seems sort of a dirty word in the farming community. I mean, what impact has that had on you? I mean, has it been positive, negative?
We were promised the earth and have been delivered nothing, is the answer. We've had a huge amount of uncertainty since Brexit. the subsidies have gone. They've replaced them with something that they believe has replaced the subsidies, but they haven't by a long shot. You know, we were £200 a hectare. I reckon what they've replaced it with across the whole arable area, we would probably be sub £100 a hectare.
Wow.
So it's a big difference, big hit.
Just in the centre of Ling at the moment.
We were now heading off to the sugar beet field, and on the way, Edward reflected on the stress of losing a crop.
It takes a bit of getting over, because you've spent 9 months, it's like having a baby. It's like 9 months of nurturing a crop and then not being able to get it. It's annoying. Waste of resources as well. There's a lot of time and effort and money goes into producing good crops, and then not to be able to get it.
They must
is an awful one. 10 years ago, we lost a lot of sugar beet through a frost event, -10 or -11, I think it was, something -12, and it basically ruined the crop in the ground, and we lost an awful lot of money that year, through no fault of our own, just nature.
On the sugar beet field, Edward opened up about mental health in farming.
Well, mental health is an issue because fundamentally we're lone workers, and with the lone, you have a lot of time to think about things, and issues get bigger and bigger that don't necessarily need to get bigger and bigger. But the mind's a funny thing, and it does take over. And that's the same when you're sitting in a cab all the day on your own. So there are issues that you have to be aware of. And I check the men. I like to go and make face-to-face contact with them, although I can call them on a telephone and a two-way radio. I like to make face-to-face contact with them at least once a day, sometimes twice. I know someone many years ago who took his own life. He was a family friend and a farmer. We're talking 15, 20 years ago. At the time, it wasn't a big subject. Social media's made it a big subject because you never see anybody without a smile on the face in Instagram, do you? You're always doing things that you want to do, and you just think, oh, am I the only one that can't do it? So I think that's got a lot to blame.
I decided to start doing some research into the statistics to try and understand the scale of the mental health problem amongst the farming community. I've spent a lot of time now digging through the statistics on rural mental health, including looking through multiple reports, and it's fair to say it's quite a complex story, but I've picked out some of the key data to try and paint a picture. So let's start off with some figures from the Office of National Statistics around suicide rates amongst the agricultural community. The most recent available year for suicide rates by all occupations is 2021. In that year, 92 people in agricultural occupations in England and Wales committed suicide, and it's remained around this level since 2011. But suicide rates are just the tip of the iceberg. Just over 1 in 3 farmers in a recent major survey reported being depressed. That's over twice the level in the general population. Some of the major factors causing stress are unpredictable weather, regulation, and loss of farming subsidies. And the pressures are only increasing. A recent National Farmers Union survey amongst their members found that 68% considered rising input costs to have a negative impact on their mental health.
The natural, productive beauty of our countryside conceals a painful truth. Many in farming and other rural businesses struggle with poor mental health.
I'm now off to go and see Emma Haley, who runs the pioneering charity YANA, based at the Norfolk Showground, to find out what is being done to address the issue. Can you just tell me a bit about YANA and what you do as a charity?
YANA is a mental health and suicide prevention charity, and we work with people in the agriculture and rural business sector. So that can range from people on the ground doing farming, horticulture, through to vets and rural police, and all the professionals and suppliers that sit around that. YANA started in 2008. There was an organisation in Norfolk called the Clan Trust, and they experienced someone that the sort of trustees experienced a loss of someone that they knew quite very well to suicide, and they really wanted to think there must be something that can be done to make a difference and try and prevent this from happening.
Why would you say that poor mental health is so prevalent amongst rural communities and farming communities?
One of the key threads really is the isolation and the long hours. There's so much uncertainty and so many different factors and pressures. It's very complex issues and simple things that just not making enough profit, not making any profit, not making enough money to cover the costs that you've outlaid, build up. And so it just takes that one thing too many, which then puts you in a state where you just feel like you can't carry on, because how do you find your way out of this?
To those suffering from stress and depression, we have a simple message. You are not alone.
I quickly learnt that YANA supplies a number of important support services to those in rural and agricultural communities.
We provide a confidential helpline and funded counselling, so that can be put in place within usually a week, so really quick help when it's needed.
Right.
We provide mental health training, so in the form of training mental health first aiders who are out every day in their workplaces and communities with the confidence to notice if someone might be struggling and have helpful conversations with that. We build awareness of mental health through attending a lot of events and giving talks in different settings, and we distribute a national suicide prevention resource called 7 Tractor Facts to Save a Life, and we send that to all sorts of different people up and down the country. Useful resource that can just sit in people's pockets or in their cab.
Like Emma said, the documentary is essentially looking at rural mental health. It was clear that mental health first aid training was a key part of YANA's work, so I went along to one of their sessions at the Norfolk Showground to find out more.
So we explore obviously issues around suicide, anxiety, and look at how we would apply the process to help that person and that individual. Normalising mental health is really, really important, especially with the charity that I work with YANA. It's getting that message out there that, people that potentially work in isolation and have all of those stresses. You've heard some of the examples this morning, the dairy farmers and vets and things that have got really quite stressful jobs. In terms of looking after themselves, but also being able to seek sort of signs and symptoms of other people within the workforce.
What would your message be to a farmer that is really struggling with their mental health?
Talk to someone. It's something that you hear so much. I will talk to someone, and it's hard to understand how talking to someone can help if you've never done that. But take a really brave step, and whether it's through YANA or another organisation or someone that you know, just find a way to let someone know that you're struggling. We often hear people's experience of how YANA's helped them, and it's those times that you realise what important work this is and how much it really is making a difference. We occasionally hear stories of, that people that wouldn't be here if they hadn't had the help from YANA. And I think when you remember those things and you remember why you're doing what you're doing, there is no greater reward than that, really.
It was clear from speaking to Emma and Edward and looking at the statistics that poor mental health in rural communities is a significant issue. So what do politicians have to say about it?
Okay, welcome to the second half of this hearing on rural mental health.
A cross-party committee for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs launched an inquiry into rural mental health in November 2021 and spoke to a wide range of experts in this field. They published their report in May 2023 and concluded there are several areas of considerable concern and to make urgent and meaningful government action on rural mental health essential. The government published its response to this report in November 2023 and rejected many of their specific recommendations. The chair of the committee, Sir Robert Goodwill, said, "With this response, the government demonstrates a worrying degree of complacency on the issue and so will fail to confront the significant problem of improving rural mental health." I asked the Conservative MP for North Norfolk, Duncan Baker, for his thoughts on Sir Robert Goodwill's comments.
Like all these things, funding is always the issue. And like we just said previously, being able to identify and get the right funding into these areas is often a huge challenge because, let's be blunt, the country does not have huge amounts of capacity and fiscal headroom at the moment.
He went on to say that he thinks the charitable sector has a key role to play in this area.
I'm a firm believer in the charitable sector. I think we get far too hung up with everything must be corporate, everything must be funded by the state. And actually, there is always a very, very good role for the charity sector to play in.
YANA had given evidence to the committee, and so I asked Emma how she felt about the government's response.
It was very disappointing that the government's response finally came out to that last year with no action or no changes to be made or no action to be taken. There is nods to action being taken. I sense probably that people in farming are going to be quite wary of anything that anyone says they're going to do until they see actually things happen.
The government have said,
"We remain committed to improving the mental health support available to rural communities and access to it. We will continue to work together and across government to ensure that this is done."
We're all completely unique in how we express or experience stress.
I'm back with Emma from YANA, this time at an old railway station in Reepham, where she's giving a talk to young farmers about their mental health.
It's really important to create spaces where we can talk about these things together so that it breaks a little bit of that stigma. So it's great they all have a lot of awareness and understanding now, but it's really by having the conversations in the room together, they all have known the same thing, and it breaks down that barrier of not being able to speak about it and bring things up because they've all been part of those conversations.
Young farmers are an important target for YANA, as a recent survey by the Farm Safety Foundation showed that 88% of young farmers rate poor mental health as the biggest hidden problem in the industry.
We spend an hour really exploring a little bit about what stress and anxiety is, helping people to develop a self-awareness, because I believe that the more aware we are of ourselves, then the more chances we have of helping ourselves and each other before we get depressed or before we reach crisis point.
I caught up with Theo, one of the young farmers at the talk, to ask him what he learnt from the evening.
What stuck most in my mind would be the fact that people put on the front of over-exaggerating their happiness, where it's actually a form of depression in the background. Overcompensation would be what stuck with me. I think it's very important just to get the word out there. As they said, it can just be a matter of asking someone a question, whether they give a sarcastic response or a proper response. It's more to the point that you've spoken to them about it and they will subconsciously think about it.
How did you feel it went today?
Yeah, it was really good. It was it's young farmers groups meeting all sorts of places, so you never quite know where you're coming to. So it was a really nice environment to be in, and everyone was really accepting and welcoming and really willing to get engaged and involved, and that really makes it a much richer experience for everyone.
Thank you.
My investigation into rural mental health is coming to an end. During my journey, I've looked at the pressures on the farming front line and uncovered some worrying statistics about rural mental health. I've also looked at the political backdrop to this issue and seen how for some there is a sense that the government are simply not doing enough. But I've also seen a lot of reasons to be positive. I've seen firsthand how charities like YANA are helping those in agriculture and offering them a harvest of hope. Back on the farm, I caught up with Edward one last time to hear about some of the more rewarding aspects of his job and some of his hopes and fears for the future.
The hopes are that we carry on remaining profitable and providing us with a good living. My fear is succession. I've got 3 young boys who are all quite keen in the business, but quite frankly, as we are today, I don't think the business is financially big enough to support all 3 of them. So we've got some big questions to answer how we go forward. The most rewarding part for me is going to work and no one else about, and I see the birds and watching the crops develop. I love the seasons. In an office you don't get a season, do you? You just get mundane stuff. And ultimately, the ultimate reward is harvesting a good crop. Tomorrow's always a better day in my mind.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I try and focus if I have a dark moment, tomorrow's another day and it's going to be a better day.